Chapter 35. Eyes of the Comedy Booker. Any wannabe paid set comedian who created an email address such as killerset@gmail.com, like Joshua did 15 years ago, never outgrew his insatiable need to dominate on stage, and finally delivered the elusive, teasing, killer laugh wave set from start to finish for 5 minutes straight. When Joshua told his dad about his new showbiz-hued email address, his expected reply was, "I create a new email address that sounds more professional because any employer will think you're crazy. I don't even know how we're related. Killerset@gmail.com is a good email address if you're joining a sex cult in Waco, Texas. Genius." But Joshua was way past giving a shit about acting in accordance with so-called bounds of normalcy within the eyes of hiring sales managers and HR humpbacks littered throughout corporate America, because becoming a professional comedian who got paid to write funny or perform the funny you wrote on stage was a giant fuck you to the straight corporate hack professional world versus the world of entertainment, which rewards you for being excellent at getting your funny man freak on for a living. It brought Joshua tremendous joy and prideful satisfaction to impress major comedy bigwigs with his writing, such as headliner great Nick DiPaolo, who Joshua fondly remembers always laughing the hardest from out of all the Comedy Cellar comic greats on Tough Crowd from back in the day, which he used to get stoned and watch with his Ithaca bud JT, who had just moved down to Hermosa Beach nearby. The same JT who made tasteless Holocaust jokes, who peed himself constantly from getting blackout drunk without fail every time, but he was a solid drinking weed bud who had his shit together enough to end up graduating from Babson after transferring there from Ithaca to score a job doing SAP finance at Raytheon in nearby Redondo Beach. Joshua tolerated the occasional Holocaust jokes because some Gentiles are more tasteless degenerates than their fellow Jewish friends who weren't blessed with a funny Jew bun either, so they can't discern what's really funny versus truly tasteless either. JT and Joshua would love blasting the Motley Crue album Too Fast for Love together after they got their drink on at the Poop Deck in Hermosa Beach, after work with some other buds right off the Strand, where everyone would get a pitcher of cheap lager beer for $4 each, and you were allowed 2 pitchers each, so the amassment of pitchers grew quite large if they were 10 deep that night at the Poop Deck. During one of those nights, pounding cheap beer, soaking up the joyous youth of their mid-20s, no longer freezing their balls off back east, JT tells Joshua, "Your short-term memory is an embarrassment to your people, but you're a social genius, man." Another one of their drinking buds, who was a Marine, once told Joshua, "You could be the next Larry David, man." And Joshua wasn't even that funny back then, nor did he even grow the ballsack yet to try being funny on stage at that point in his life. Joshua missed his friend JT. They passed out at a 311 concert together in Long Beach, only 10 minutes in. Last he heard, JT got stone cold sober after his ex-roommate and friend Gerard died from cancer at 32. The same good guy Gerard from Indiana, who booked the hotel room at the Marriott by the Times Square for Joshua and JT for New Year's Eve one year. It was impossible to not think of dear Gerard when Joshua finished writing a script for America's Hot 100 at Viacom headquarters, blocks down from the same Marriott in Times Square, where he saw his jubilant, edge-free, rock-solid, good guy face, where he wouldn't see his jubilant, edge-free, rock-solid, good guy face ever again. But it was Greenwich Village, which held a longer-lasting special clasp on Joshua's heart, way more so than Times Square ever had, regardless of it being the site of his TV writing break, which was 12 years in the making or not. Greenwich Village was another universe within New York City, another magical universe within New York City, and always more intimate and romantic than the now Salesforce building tainted skyline in Midtown Manhattan. Herald Square by Madison Square Garden was still a dump at large. Upper East had seen better days. Upper West was still for single cat depressed cat ladies. Chelsea was overpriced, bland, and nothing to write home about either. Hell's Kitchen, now nicknamed Hell's Kitty, on the outskirts of Times Square and the Theater District, possessed a quaint, quiet charm, but never exuded a posh, I have to live here no matter what, or I'll die a creative failure inside. The Lower East Side, south of Houston on Mott, or Ludlow was cool, but cramped. And Ronan Farrow lived there, in one of those luxurious condo high-rises, so how rock and roll was the former cruising ground of William Burroughs, after all. Soho was gorgeous, the Eurotrash and decked-out Prada smoking American Spirit cigarettes, lingering outside the Mercer Hotel, not so much. The cobblestone streets and Tribeca Loss at Battery Park were sweet, but it was impossible to not contemplate the avoidable specter of large-scale death still hovering in the air from Ground Zero, now replaced with the giant FU Freedom Tower, as a heart-crushing reminder of America's never-ending war against terror, when W fucked up everything he touched without fail. The East Village had Jones Street in St. Mark's, where Joshua used to get his bootleg dead tapes in college. But now, all I saw around these parts were fresh out of the womb, zero-style nerds who worked as coders, product managers, or UX designers for Goodwill Hoodie at Facebook, Greenwich Village by NYU outside of Washington Square Park, and the Comedy Cellar in Bitter End is what gave Joshua sustained stiffage a long time, because that's where the action was. Where he used to chase on open mics and bringer shows, were possessive, have to make it here drive, or die a nobody hack for hire forever. All of Joshua's comedic heroes of yesteryear got their joke-hitting practice at dumps such as the Bitter End and within the basement bunker known as the Comedy Cellar. Joshua was still enamored with Joan Rivers, Ronnie, and the new school cast of big deal stand-up clowns like Jim Norton, Chris Rock, the late great Greg Giraldo, and Nick Lick My White Italian Nuts DiPaolo, knowing they all earned their pro stripes within these hollowed, better not suck walls. The stoop-heavy streets of the West Village along Perry Street, where Sarah Jessica Parker wrote her Sex and the City column on HBO, would always be a magical wonderland within New York City to get lost in roaming around. Yet Joshua wasn't a fabulous gay investment banker with a personal MMA trainer at his beck and call to afford such high-end Ivy League building surroundings either. Joshua had some good sets at the Comedy Cellar when he used to work as an IT agency recruiter on 39 Broadway, using his office to fax copies of his Always Sunny in Philadelphia spec script. The gang gets outsourced. There was a super cute, always perky up top Holly in his office, who we totally could have mounted on top of his desk after work with real Joel Attack Fury if he chose to do so. Sweet Holly and Joshua would go out to lunch together for cheesesteaks, and her friends on Facebook in their early 20s compared to Joshua, being 31 at the time, were even hotter, banging professional baseball players at large. Joshua was always into Italian girls, and they were really into him, too. Holly even helped Joshua develop his signature Seeing Eye Dog bit at work late one night. She says in a friendly, helpful way, "Why don't you try acting out the Seeing Eye Dog?" Joshua took her advice and did his bit in front of the always beautiful, spastic laugh-spewing Holly, and says, "Do blind men ever get the beer goggles? Assuming they do, does the Seeing Eye Dog ever offer a second opinion? We better pass on this one, Stevie. You could feel her face, but I could smell her snatch. Woof, woof." Holly finishes laughing long time and says, "I love you getting down on all fours. You're going to kill at the Comedy Cellar tonight. I can feel it." Holly was the best. If Joshua wasn't a nice Jewish boy living with his girlfriend, now wife Anna, at the time, he would have made a move on her. Holly even recommended Joshua start writing books for a living, without even reading any of his story scripts. Just some sample Valentine's Day cards when Joshua thought he could finance his stand-up comedy career by becoming a freelance card writer for Hallmark like Adam Sandler and Mr. Deeds. It was hard not to think of Holly as Joshua greeted Esther at her comedy club, the Laugh Yanker, a new addition to the Greenwich Village stand-up comedy scene, only blocks away from the famed Comedy Cellar, whose comedy booker was Israeli-born also. Esther greets Joshua outside her comedy club, finishing smoking her Camel White cigarette, Turkish blend. "Hi, Joshua. You're strutting in Manhattan, like you're in a New York groove again," she says. Joshua replies, "Your presence gets my mojo rising, Esther." Esther replies, "So I heard your comedy record. Resist This. You got it, kid. Very funny stuff. I just don't know if New York City is ready for you yet. You could be a tad overwhelming. Have you ever considered writing a novel? You can let your imagination run wild and use a narrator voice. So you're singular in the third person. So your singular, larger-than-life personality doesn't overwhelm all your senses at once the way it does in your comedy. Debt record. Resist This. The Seeing Eye Dog bit was one of my personal favorites. I see you as a dreamy crossbreed of Richard Lewis, Dice, and Rodney Dangerfield." Joshua's smartphone rings. He says, "You're too kind, Esther. Just give me a second." Joshua picks up his phone and hears, "Hello, Joshua. This is Pierre, the creative director at Porsche SUV. We loved your audition and want you to be our new face and voice for our family-friendly Porsche SUV campaign." Joshua replies, "That's great news, Pierre, but you'll have to talk to my agent, Matilda, to hammer out all the business details." Pierre says, "You mean your 9-year-old daughter? I already have, Joshua. That's why you'll have your own Comedy Gold Porsche SUV as a signing bonus, as an act of good faith to secure your services for this campaign." She insisted. "Congrats again," or as your people say, Mazel Tov. Joshua says to Esther, "Feel my face. I just got my Comedy Gold Porsche SUV. Mobile. Do my cheeks feel flush with untapped possibility? Still, why do I feel the urge to do an open mic set at the Comedy Cellar right now or at the New York Comedy Club for old time's sake and be the most patronizing asshole imaginable?" Esther says, "Sounds like you're in the mood for a victory lap to me."